Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Sabrina. This video will be part 2 of the rag quilt tutorial. In part 1, if you watched, I went over the cutting of the fabric and the cutting of the batting, getting everything prepped for the sewing and assembly of the rag quilt. So that's what this video will be. I think the rag quilt turned out absolutely freaking cute. So I hope you enjoy the video. Please like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments if you've made rag quilts. Maybe there are some different ways that you may have done them, but I will also go over the washing instructions in the video how I do it. So again, here we go. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. Okay, here we go. Let's get started on this rag quilt. So what I didn't mention in the last video, this is my little sketch of what I'm working on here. So the buffalo check is this color on here. There's a total of 32 squares. So I had to cut 64 pieces of the buffalo check, this color. So that we're going to have one piece for the front and one piece for the back of the square. This color is the small check. There's a total of 15 of the small check squares. So I need a total of 30 pieces of this. The solid gray is this square. There's a total of 16 of these. So I need 32 pieces of this. One for the front and one for the back. So that's my little check there or sketch that I made of all the pieces I'm going to need. So at this point we are going to need some pins, some thread, some marking pencils. Now I'm going to use this Clover chalk pen on the gray square. It's not going to show up very well on these two, so I need something different to use. So you can either use like a water-soluble pen, or you can use one of these friction pens that erase with heat. I know some people don't like using these because they say that you can see it come back after time, or certain temperatures might show the mark after time. But because I'm stitching on top of this mark, I'm not really going to be worried about this, and this will be getting washed as soon as I'm done. So I'm not worried about the friction pens showing up on my pieces. So I'll probably most likely use the friction pen. So to get started, I'm going to start with the gray squares. We're going to need some pins. And basically I'm just going to set up myself a little assembly station here. And we're going to need one piece for the bottom. We're going to put our batting on top and center it the best we can. And then we're going to put another piece of this gray on top. Now, if you wanted to use solid gray for the whole back, you can. You don't have to use the same color on the back that you do on the front. It's totally up to you how you want to build this and what colors you want to use. I chose to use the same color on the back so that I have some variation on the back. So once we have our little sandwich together, we're going to draw an X from one corner to the other with our marking pen. So there's my mark. We're going to turn it over. And we're going to draw one on the other corner. Now, if you don't want to, you don't have to draw your marks. You could very easily just take this to the machine. If you have some kind of tape on your machine, you could follow the tape or guide on your machine. That's totally up to you. But I am going to mark mine, and I'm also going to pin them just to kind of hold them in place a little bit so they're not shifting around. So when I get to the sewing machine, I'm not sitting there fiddling with it, trying to make sure it's all neat again. So if you wanted to, you could even sit at your sewing machine and build this as you go. That's up to you. So I'll just do a few more and show you how this goes together. Put this on top. I'm going to pin it. Draw my line. And draw one this way. And I'm just going to keep stacking these up until they're all done. And then we'll move to the sewing machine. And if you feel comfortable enough, you don't have to pin, you don't have to mark. You can just pile up your squares and hit the machine and eyeball it. Okay, got that one. And I'm not really worried about my pins being in the way when I'm trying to mark these. As long as I can see most of it, it's good. Okay, I'm gonna pause, and when you come back, they'll all be pinned and ready to go. And we're just gonna begin sewing on that X that we drew. I am going to increase my stitch length to 3.0. Do not sew over your pins, but I am going to move the pin so that whenever I sew the next side, everything kind of stays in place. Now I am going to chain piece. It's much faster, so I'm just going to keep chain piecing all of these. Also, whenever you're sewing, make sure that this doesn't get folded under. Make sure these stay together. Alright guys, I had a little trouble with my machine, but it also made me remember that I could be using my walking foot to feed this through. It would feed it through much more evenly, all the layers that we're putting through there. So if you don't have one of these, you can probably check with your manufacturer to see if you can get one. But I'm going to install this, and I'll show you how this works. I kind of forgot all about using the walking foot. So I'm going to cut my thread, and we'll install this. So I'm taking this shank off. It's a little bit harder to get to with this table here. There we go. Alright. Don't lose your screw. And I'm going to put this on. So this little piece here goes up around where my needle screws on. And this piece here goes up against that. And then we're going to put the screw in. Alright, now let's tighten it. That was quite the task. Alright, there we go. This one's pieced. Alright, let's start with this one. Now you can see I did not mark all of my squares. So, but you can if you like. So now we're going to cut these all apart. There we go. Okay, so now that we have those all together, one side stitched, we're going to work on the other corner. And I'm going to put my pins away as I go. So here we go. These are all done and ready. So I'm going to pause you guys here, and it doesn't really matter, I don't think, which side is the top or bottom, but I'm going to go ahead and finish all the other squares, and then I will come back and I will show you how we are cutting the hearts to put the hearts on, and then we can work on that together. Okay guys, almost there. A few more, but look at all these squares piled up. I still have to do the other corner, but I'm getting there. Okay, I did stop to clean my machine out, and this is the dust that come out of there. So make sure you're cleaning your machine when you're doing these, because it does get a little dusty. I'm just taking this brush here, brushing out some of that, and I'm brushing off my foot here. I had to change my bobbin because I ran out of thread, so I thought while I was doing that I would go ahead and take a look at what was in here. So again, just another little side note, make sure you're maintaining your machine. Okay, all of our squares are done. There's a nice picture of this one and this one. That's how they should look. And this one. So now I'm gonna go ahead and press these. Probably don't have to, but I think they would look better. And when you go to sew these together, I think it'll just look better. So all I'm doing is just taking an iron and I'm just gonna press that just so all of the corners are nice and neat, so that whenever we do assemble these, everything looks nice and neat and will line up a little bit nicer. So as I said, this is just a quick, and I think this is a nice way to just kind of make sure you did sew an X on every piece, that you didn't accidentally sew up one of these bottom pieces wrong or something when you were pushing it through the machine. So this is all I'm doing, and then we'll come back. I'll pause you guys and then we'll come back and get started on the hearts. Okay, here we are. We have all of our squares pressed. They look real nice. They feel nice and flat, so that when we are assembling these and piecing them together, they'll go together not much nicer. We got our gray ones. So at the moment we do not need these. I'm going to move these out of the way, but we do need our yellow. We'll need some pins, and we will need some scissors. So the way I'm doing this is I made a template of a heart, and I just used Microsoft Word, inserted clip art, cut out a heart, and then I think what I'm going to do is trace this on a piece of cardboard, so that the cardboard or some kind of template plastic, so that I can trace the heart out on the yellow strips, and then we're going to cut that out. So let me trace this on a piece of cardboard. Okay, so I got my cardboard template. It looks a little big on that square at the moment, but when we sew the yellow fabric down, we're going to be sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So this outside edge is actually going to fold up a little bit. So that leaves you a little bit more of an edge to see the gray fabric underneath. So here's an example of a rag quilt I did with stars. So you can see how when I sewed that star on, there's a seam allowance around there. So you could use anything you wanted to use for this. You could do an X's and O's rag quilt. We have stars, hearts, moons. The list is endless probably if you wanted to try out some different shapes when you're doing this. But right now we're going to cut out our hearts. So this is how I'm doing it. Some of you might have a better technique that might work for you, but I'm basically just lining up these 6-inch strips that we cut, and I did cut the heart at 6 inches by 6 inches, or printed at 6 inches by 6 inches. So when I put it in Microsoft Word, I made the size 6 by 6 so that it would fit on my strips here. So I'm going to have a few layers at a time that I'm going to cut. So I'm just going to line up this fabric. I have 3 layers here. And I'm basically just going to trace this heart on the fabric. I'm going to put some pins in under here to keep it together. I'm going to put that on there. I'm going to use a friction pen. It's not going to be seen. We're going to be cutting this edge. And I'm going to trace around here. Okay, so there's our heart. And then I'm going to flip it this way and line it up. I'm going to put some pins under here. And I'm going to trace this one. If your edge is cut off just a tad, it's fine. It'll be fine. And if you wanted to, you can cut the fabric a little bit wider so that you can fit them on better. And then we're going to do this one. If you wanted to do just 1 or 2 layers at a time, you can. You might even want to use a Cricut machine to cut out these hearts. Lay your fabric out on one of those mats. And the reason why I'm pinning this is so that we're going to cut these with scissors. And if you want to add more pins to hold those layers together while we're cutting. That's what I'm doing here. Make sure everything stays in place. Okay, I'm just going to use some fabric scissors and I'm just going to start cutting this out. If you wanted to use rotary cutter, you can. So I'm going to just cut these right here, just to make it easier to cut. There we go. Now at this point, we probably could use a rotary cutter if you wanted to. Just watch your fingers, that's all. Watch your fingers. Doesn't have to be perfect. So there we are. And if you do cut a little bit into this fabric here, past your line, again, that's okay because we're going to be snipping these edges to give it a rag effect. There we go. We have those. Push that out of the way. And there we go. Let's see what we have left under here. Gotta use all of it, as much as you can. I can get another heart out of here. Another set of hearts. Now, if you really wanted to be brave, you could use that as a guide for cutting. That's up to you. There you go. Might be good to use a rotary mat to do this. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to pull these pins out. top of each other. So now I just kind of want to make sure these are mixed up a little bit, because I am putting 2 layers of hearts on those blocks. So I just kind of want to mix these up a little. Put this one on top. Put this on top. So, Alright, so I have 2 layers of hearts. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to center these on these blocks here, like that. And I'm going to pin them on. I would say it's probably be important to get this corner down here and this corner up here. Keep them in place. There we go. So we're going to have that on there like that. So I'm going to cut some more. I'll just show you how I cut. We'll cut some more of these, and then I'm going to pause you guys, and then we'll come back to it. So again, I'm just going to use my rotary cutter to cut. Okay, here we go. So I went ahead and did this one with gray stitching so that you can see what it's going to look like when you sew it on. You're going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the edge. So for the yellow hearts, I think I'm going to switch out to this gray or this yellow thread and top stitch those with yellow. I just think that would look better. And I'm going to leave gray in my bobbin because it's gray on the back. So to keep my 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm kind of following the edge of my presser foot here, and I'm keeping the edge of the yellow heart on the edge of this foot. So you can start anywhere. Make sure you're not running over your pins. I do back stitch. Go as fast or as slow as you're comfortable doing. When you get to these round edges here, I kind of just keep my needle down and then just proceed slowly and just keep pivoting. As you go. Definitely good practice for sewing curves. Pivot, and I'm going to backstitch again and cut my thread. So that is basically it. So we have this one sewed on. You can look at that. And I'm going to keep going. I'll do a few more on camera. That way you can get an idea of what I'm doing here. Back stitch. Pull your needles out. Go as fast or as slow as you're comfortable. These seams for this stitching, once you rag these edges, you're not going to see that stitching. This is what the back looks like. Probably we could have, instead of sewing the X's, we probably could have just sewed the hearts on, and that would have been the quilting, but I opted to go ahead and sew the X. But you can probably eliminate the X on these if you're sewing or appliquing a heart or a design on top. Okay, so we have all of our hearts sewn on. Nice big pile here. Now what we want to do before we start assembling all these pieces together is, I think it's easier to go ahead and snip your heart now before we assemble the pieces. So basically all I'm doing is taking a pair of scissors, and I'm just going to go around here quickly, and we're just going to snip this edge. So you can find somewhere comfortable to sit and just sit and do this. You can do about every 1/4 inch, every 1/2 inch. One thing you do want to make sure of is that you are not clipping into your threads. You just want to clip this edge, this seam allowance here that we left. And what this is going to do is allow that edge to fray. Do it on this one. Okay, that's all we need to do. So we're going to do all of these, and then I will be back with the next step. Okay, so I have all the hearts on, and I did, as you can see, rag around the edges. So this was a nice little project I could do while watching TV. But it's going to look really nice like once we wash it, and this kind of frays, it'll look really cute around that edge. But I have the quilt laid out on the floor. Give you guys a look before I sew it together. So this is what it's going to look like. So now what I'm going to do is pile up my rows on top of each other and make stacks. So I should have 9 rows, 9 piles, and then there will be 7 squares in each pile. And then we'll get started on sewing these together. Okay, so now I have them all stacked by row. I laid them out on my table, and then we are going to start sewing them. Okay, so I still have my walking foot on. I changed out the top thread back to gray, so that we can start assembling these blocks into rows. And I am going to put the stitch length back up to 3, and we're just going to get sewing. So I'm going to start with this first row here. And what's fun about this quilt also is we are putting wrong sides together. So we want to sew and top stitch we're going to line these up, and we're just going to make sure this is my first block. We're attaching it to the next block. So when it's done, it's going to open up like this. Your seam allowance is going to be on top. So let's get started on that. We'll do a row together. And I'm going to be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you have a stitch guide, seam guide. You can use that on your machine. I'm going to make sure that is 1/2 inch. So I have this little ruler here, and it's marked 1/8, 1/4, 3/8, 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to do is put my needle down in this 1/2 inch. And I'm going to put my seam guide right here. So I know as I'm sewing that that is my 1/2 inch guide. Alright, let's get started. Okay, there's our first one. And then we're going to put the second one down. And we're going to do the same thing. Make sure you're picking them up so that the back sides are together. And we're going to sew this. We're gonna just keep on moving. Make sure you're grabbing from the right pile. And we're gonna put these back sides together again. And we're gonna sew 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright, next one. I think this is going to be so pretty. I really love these colors together. Oh, lost one. And it doesn't matter if you're putting it on this way, this way, this way, but as far as the hearts go, you do want to make sure that all your hearts are facing the direction that you want them to be going. So this first row, I have the hearts facing up, and then when I put on this second row, I want my hearts facing down. So just kind of pay attention to that. That's one thing that you might forget about, or at least I would forget about. Now you can pin these also if you like. If you would prefer to have them pinned, you can do that. See, it goes pretty quick. There's not a whole lot of thinking that goes into this. Just sit down and sew. But here is the first row. So I'm going to keep moving on, and I'm going to keep working on these rows, and then when I have all the rows put together, I'll come back and show you how we put the rows together. Okay, all the rows are sewed together. So now we need to sew these together like this. So at these seams, when we sew these together, it's going to get a little bulky. So if you can see that, you've got both these seams coming together. So what I am going to do is push one this way and push this one this way, and we're going to nest those together so that you're not running over all this bulk like this real thick. Now if you're using a regular piecing foot, you might need like a hump jumper or something like that to kind of get over those edges possibly. But I'm using my walking foot. I probably shouldn't have any problems with it, but I am also going to pin those seams together because I want to make sure that when I'm sewing this together that these seams are lining up. So I am going to nest those together, and I'm going to put a pin in there to hold it. I just want these to look as neat as possible as far as these seams. I don't want anything, I just want to make sure they go together evenly and that those line up. So I'm just going to keep doing this, line these up, make sure one seam is going one way and one seam's going the other way, and just nest those together. And you can see how this fabric is really frays easily, so it's gonna rag up really nice. So I will do this on all of these. And of course, when you put these together, you want to make sure that you're putting the back sides together like this. And I wanted the top row of hearts facing this direction, the second row of hearts facing this direction, and then this row will repeat on row 3. And then again, we're going to stitch the top of this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And let me put this pin in here, and then I'll take you to the machine and show you how I sew these rows together, which is pretty much how we put pieced these together. And I'm going to put a pin right here also, just to hold that in place. I'm going to put a pin on the end. Looks like it's lining up nice and even. And then once I get all these rows together, I am going to put like an edge on this, and kind of like a little border around the edge. So I'll show you how I do that step. Okay. This is what we got so far. So let's sew it up. Okay, I'm just going to start sewing where I placed my pins. I'm just going to kind of roll this up, place it on my lap, and start sewing with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can kind of feel where that needle is pretty much going right along the edge of where your batting is. So that's usually a good sign too that, you know, you have a good 1/2 inch seam allowance, because when we cut the batting and the fabric, the batting was a 1/2 inch smaller on all around the edges than this fabric, the homespun fabric. Alright, so we're getting close to that seam. I do not want to run over my pin, but I do want to make sure that my joints stay nested together. So that's row 1 and 2. I'm gonna pin row 3 on, and I'm gonna sew the rest of these together, and then I'll get back to you on how I like to do the edge. Okay, as you can see, this does get kind of bulky when you're trying to feed this weight through your machine. So you do need to be aware of making sure you're adjusting your quilt as you need to, so that it goes through the machine making sure that the weight down here isn't holding it back. Okay, I'm on the last piece I need to sew. This is all the thread I have left to get this row on. So I really hope I can do this and that I will be able to get this last row on. I might have to change thread when I do the border, put a different gray on or something. I have some other gray colors I can use, but I think that's the last of this color I have. So let's see if I can get this done. Okay, there we go. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Probably shouldn't have backstitched. Looking close. I hope I can get this. Oh my. This is all I got left. Let's see if it works. Oh my. Oh, I think it's gonna work. I would really hate to run out of thread. Oh my. Oh man, this is so close. Oh no, it's right here. That's where it ended. That I have a little bit for backstitch. That is crazy. Oh. Alright, this is what's left. This little piece right here. Can you see that? This little piece is what I had left. I used up the whole spool. There's some left in the bobbin. If I had to, I could have pulled some off of here, possibly, to finish this. Alright, so it's done. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, here we are. I think it turned out very, very pretty. So I want to make sure all my hearts are going the right directions, which I believe they are. I think it is so pretty. I like it. But we are not done. There's still a few more steps we need to make. Here's the back. There's the back. You can see how we can cut some of this off. I will go through here and trim off any loose threads. I definitely need to do that, so. But most of it's done. Could probably take a lint roller across the back of it too to get any threads. Most of them will pull right out. But you can see how all of our seams line up real nice. I think it looks really good. I'm really happy with it so far. Our X's look like they line up okay from here to here. And you can see the quilting of the heart on the back of the fabric. So, all right, let's go to the next step. Let me show you what we're gonna do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a border around the edge of this on the front and the back. And it's gonna add layers to the edge that is also going to get frayed. But it's gonna give it a nice even finished look around the edges. So to figure that out, how much I'm going to need, is I took the length and the width, which the finished block is 7 inches. So 7 times 7 across is 49. 7 times 9 down is 63. So we're going to add 49 plus 63. It's 112. That's just for one side. So we got to add the other sides. So we're going to add another 112 to that. Plus 112. That's 224. But because I need it for the back also, I'm going to add another 224. That gives me 448. So we have at least 40 inches of workable material as far as our width. Then I'm going to take the 448 and divide it by 40. That's 11.2. So I'm going to round up and say I need 12 strips of fabric to go around the front perimeter and the back perimeter of this quilt. So let's cut the 1-inch strips. I'm going to trim my edge off and make it straight. Flip it around, and I'm going to cut 1-inch strips. I think I'm going to do 1.25 inches, just to give it a little more room or border on the edge of the quilt. So I'm going to do 1.25 inches. I wanted to use the dark gray fabric, but I did not have enough left over. So I'm going to use this. 7, 8, 9. Two more. All right. There we go. So now I'm going to trim these. Or not trim, I'm going to sew these together to make long strips that will fit down the width and length of all sides of the front and back of the quilt. So you can sew these however you want. If you want to do end to end and stitch there, or if you want to do it like this and then stitch from here to here and then open it up like that. However you want to do it. But I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll start sewing it on. Okay, so I have all these strips sewn together. And what I want to do is lay this right on top, line both the raw edges together. And I'm going to pin it across. Let me see if I can get you guys. Okay, so I'm going to pin it across the top. And then I'm also having one pinning across the bottom. So you could sew these all on at one time, or you can do 2 separate stitches. I'm going to put mine all on at one time, and I'm actually going to sit at the machine and just try to just line them up as I go. But when I do sew, I'm putting this on and I'm lining this up on the bottom like this. So all these raw edges are going to be together. I'm going to sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance again along here. So what's going to happen is when we're done sewing this all on, this we're going to press over like this, and you're going to have a nice solid border around the edge of the quilt, so that when we do start ragging and cutting and clipping these edges, your front and back of this quilt, it's going to have a nice border. So the same thing with the front. It's going to have a nice solid edge around there that we're going to clip so that it fringes and gives the ragging effect. So that's where I'm at now, and this is my next step. So I'm going to work on this, and I will demonstrate how I sew that on. Let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, so when I'm laying these strips down, I want to make sure where I sewed it together, sewed the strips together, that this is laying on top, that seam is on top, so that when we sew down the 1/2 inch, when this gets folded over, that'll be hidden. So we need to make sure we do that for the back also. So I want to make sure that this seam is facing up on the back, so that when this gets folded over, you won't see that seam allowance right there. So make sure we have all of our pieces lined up. I'm going to start at the corner. I'm going to do the long edge, the sides first, the long edges. So I'm just putting that there along that edge, putting this one along this back edge. We're just going to start sewing these on, and we're going to line them up as we go. If you wanted to pin, you could pin. And we're going to have to manipulate this fabric or this blanket to make sure it's not weighing down, making it hard to... Now you could clip these on too, that would be a good idea. Clip these pieces on. It's easy to move the clips. Alright, here we go. I'm just going to start sewing. I did find some more gray thread. Alright, once you get your needle down, it goes a little bit faster lining these up. And then when you get to the seam, it doesn't matter if the seam, you can probably open up the seam to make it easier for your machine to go over. I think that's what I'm going to do, is open the seam when I get to it. There we go. So I'm going to line all these up. And just go for it. Straighten out the quilt. I'm gonna line these up until I get to the next seam. And I'm gonna push these open. Straighten this all out. Trim these off. Now I'm going to work on the other side, and I'll show you how I do the top. Okay, so when we start the top, make sure this is folded back, and make sure this top piece is folded forward, so that it's like a little sandwich. And then I will start, and again I'm making sure that the seam where I pieced these strips together is facing out, so that whenever we're done, it'll fold forward and hide the inside seam. That's going to go on the back. We're going to put the other strip on top. And make sure this is facing up where we pieced it together. And we'll lay that on there like that. And we're going to put the needle down. Then I'm going to start piecing this, sewing these together. To sew until I get to this seam, and then set up the next seam. Make sure the bottom is even, the bottom strip. It's hard to see with all this bulk in the way. So make sure that's even on the bottom. Open this seam up a little. Place this on top and keep moving. Okay. Now when you get to the end, make sure these edges are pulled forward like that. And I did measure correctly with my strips because this is all that I have left. So that was a good measurement on those. I'll put these in my scrap bin. So let's take a look at what we have so far. Okay, here we go. This is what we've got. So here, if you wanted to, you could press this down. So that looks like that. then our side looks like that. So, here we are. Now comes the fun part. We're gonna clip all this seam allowance. So find yourself a comfortable chair. I'm using these spring snips. Makes it a little bit easier, a little bit faster. I think Fiskars has also a pair of ragging shears that it's a little easier on your hand because it springs back. But basically we're just going to find a comfortable seat, chair, whatever, and we're going to start clipping these. So what I like to do is fold it like this. And what you do want to make sure though is that when you're clipping, you don't want to clip into your seam right here. Do not clip into that stitching. We're going to clip close to that stitch. Every ½ inch, ¼ inch. And you're just going to keep going. So what I like to do is hang it off the edge of a table. Let me see if we can get you. I like to hang it off the edge of the table. I like to have a seat. And I just keep clipping. Just keep moving. Again, make sure you're not snipping into your thread. These snips make it a lot easier. They do snip better if you're kind of tugging on the other side of the fabric. When I get to these corners, I do just kind of, or these seams, I will clip those. So let's see. So I just start, and these, like I said, these scissors make it easier. And whenever I get to these seams right here, I do just kind of snip the edge. So like up here, make sure this is folded back, and I do clip that, and then I'll clip the top also, and then pull these together and keep snipping. So I think I'm gonna find a movie or maybe some YouTube videos, and I'm gonna sit here and keep clipping. There's no right or wrong way, I don't think, to do this. Alright, so I'm going to keep doing this, and then I'll be back to show you the finished look, and then we'll go over how to wash it. Okay, so I have decided to take this edge that I put on And I'm going to make sure it's folded back so that I'm going to top stitch it down. So I'm just basically making sure it's folded out. And I'm going to top stitch like 1/8 of an inch from the edge here. So that way it'll hold this down. So now I'm just going to keep going around all edges. Okay, this is what we have so far. All seams are edged or ragged. The edge of it is also ragged. So you can see everything is clipped. So I did go outside and shake it off. A lot of the loose threads came out. But I think I am very, very pleased with it. And here is the back. Okay, so at this step what I did was took it to my dryer. I put a really damp towel in my dryer with the rag quilt. And then I ran the rag quilt through the dryer with the damp towel. And as you can see, it has already started ragging up pretty good. I have not washed it yet. So I ran it through the dryer and I checked the lint filter every 15 minutes or so. Clean the lint filter and then put it back on for like another 15-20 minutes. Go down and I checked the lint filter. So I kept checking the lint filter until the lint filter started to look like it was not getting as many threads or catching as many threads. So then I pulled the quilt out of the dryer, went outside and shook it off. And now I think I'm going to wash it. So after I wash it, I'll bring it back and let you guys see what it looks like after it's washed. But you can see how just running it through the dryer with a damp towel already started ragging these edges of the hearts, and I think it's looking really, really cute. And you can see where the seams are already starting to fluff up and rag, and you can see the edges are starting to fluff up and rag. So at this point I'm going to put it in the washer, and then I will get back to you and let you know and see the results. Okay, so I washed it and dried it, and again I made sure I was cleaning out the lint filter maybe every 15 minutes or so. But this is the final outcome. So you can see how it's all ragged real nice and fluffy. The hearts are nice and fluffy around the edges. Now I did go through with a pair of scissors, and any high spots that I saw or loose threads sitting out like that, I just kind of trimmed them off. At these intersections, if there were some high spots, I trimmed them off, like right here. I missed this one. So I'll trim that off. And anything along the edge, like right here, that was too long or pieces sticking out, I went along there with a pair of scissors to kind of clean up the edge and make it look nicer and neater. So I'll put this on the floor so you can see a bigger view of it. And I also went through the top of it with a little handheld vac. I only use this in my sewing room. It's pretty clean on the bottom, so I kind of use it for cleaning up my table when I'm done doing projects, picking up threads. But again, make sure you're cleaning out the filter in the vacuum, because it does collect threads, so you don't want to clog that filter up either. But I am super, super pleased with how it turned out. Absolutely love it. So I can get rid of the old one that I've been using and start using this. But let me lay it out on the floor so you can see a better view of it. Okay, there we go. I really, really, really like it. But just to recap how I washed it and took care of it, is before I washed it, I put it in the dryer after ragging all the seams with a really damp towel, and I let it run in the dryer with the towel for a while. But I was checking the filter every 15 minutes or so, making sure I cleaned the filter out of the dryer. And I would let it run for until the lint started to look like it was just less and less. Then after I was done with that process, then I put it in the washer and I dried it again. But when drying again also, I kept checking the filter to make sure that the filter wasn't getting over full, and I would clean the filter out. So when you're done, make sure you clean your filter out really well. I mean, another option would be to take it to a laundromat and put it in one of their heavy-duty washers and dryers. But again, make sure you're cleaning their filters when you're done. And another thing you might want to do also is make sure you're cleaning the filter or cleaning out your sewing machine, because there's a lot of lint that collects in your bobbin case area, and so just make sure you're cleaning that out also. But I'm pretty happy with it. Let me know what you think. Leave some comments.